Hello and welcome back everyone, I am the Otaku, and this is the video you have all been asking for. Today I'm going to teach you how to not suck at flying. Flying is a core aspect of Star Wars Battlefront alongside infantry and vehicle combat, with starfighters available on most game modes or as the main component for fighter squadron and battle station. Yet with complicated mechanics, poor controls on the PC, and severe imbalances for a very long period of time, it leaves a lot to be desired and the reason why so many players have abandoned it. However, with the release of the Death Star DLC and its abundance of space combat, as well as the accompanying patch, it's about time we take to the stars once more and make the most of this new content. So today I'm going to go through everything you need to know from controls and settings to game mechanics and strategies to teach you how to not suck at flying. Each starfighter comes with the same basic functions: flying, maneuvering, lock-on, shooting, and then some additional weapons or abilities. For now, let's talk about the different components of flying, and then we can move on to the other game mechanics. So to start things off, controlling your player model when flying is a lot different than with infantry characters. As infantry, you are mostly making micro adjustments to the character as small but frequent changes meant for quick movements and precision aiming. Flying, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. U-turns, 360s, and more are necessary for aerial combat and require long continuous movements. Because of this difference, some control options are going to be better than others. For example, with a controller, you can simply hold down the joystick in any direction you want to continuously turn. So 360s, 720s, or just doing circles until you throw up is pretty easy and straightforward. To do that with a mouse, however, would mean constantly lifting it up and dragging it across the entire available mousepad surface you have over and over and over until your arm just gives out from exhaustion. So if you're playing on a console, then you're already in a pretty good situation. If you are playing on PC though, then unfortunately you are in for a rather poor experience. There is a solution for you though, and that is to plug in a compatible console controller into your PC and use that for flying content. As far as I know, this is what most good pilots will do when playing PC. Not only are the movement patterns for flying different, but the sensitivity, camera control, turning speed, and animations are as well. What this comes down to is that you are maneuvering a vehicle and not a person. It actually makes a lot of sense for an infantry soldier or a hero to be able to quickly turn directions, changing their view and adjusting their crosshairs, just like you probably could in real life. Whereas it would be very strange if you could simply U-turn or backflip 360 in the blink of an eye while flying something similar to a jet. In other words, there has to be some sense of realistic flight movements, or it would severely destroy the immersion and authenticity of the experience. So to achieve this goal of realistic flight movements, they have essentially limited the degree and speed at which vehicles can maneuver. You'll notice here that even at 100% sensitivity, the starfighter will only turn so quickly. Whereas doing this exact same thing with an infantry soldier makes my camera view into a helicopter rotor's GoPro montage video. So starfighters have a limit on how quickly they can turn or maneuver around. What we can do to ensure that we are in fact turning and maneuvering at the maximum possible speed for that vehicle is to turn our sensitivity up when flying. It may not give you the same increase in mobility that you would get when playing an infantry soldier, but at the very least it will make sure that you are getting the most out of your vehicle. The last important component of flying is your speed. Just like an infantry soldier can walk or sprint, starfighters can fly faster or slower. You slow down by pressing the same button you would to walk backwards. Now you can't completely stand still, but you can slow down significantly, which will greatly improve your overall control of the starfighter and have some other benefits which I will talk more about later on. Just keep in mind that the slower you are going, the easier target you are. Having good control over your speed at any time is the first step to being able to maneuver difficult routes and win dogfights. But knowing when and where to adjust your speed is what's going to matter the most. Now that you understand the basic components around flying and controlling your vehicle, we need to dive into maneuvering. Maneuvering is when you use one of these special pre-built evasive maneuver abilities that are available to all starfighters. You can barrel roll to the left or right, as well as quickly backflip U-turn type thing. I have no idea what this is actually called. But these maneuvers bypass the speed limit and turn limit by taking control of your starfighter and completing an evasive maneuver animation on its own. The primary purpose is to avoid lock-on mechanics from enemy starfighters. by quickly moving away and disabling their lock-on while also shaking off incoming missiles. It can be also used to quickly turn around and avoid collisions, but as I'm sure you will find out after some time, it can cause collisions just as easily as it avoids them. The problem with maneuvers is they take complete control of your vehicle and don't allow you to cancel them partway through. This means that using them anywhere near debris or objects and in confined spaces can be very risky. So as a general rule of thumb, I try to avoid using maneuvers if possible and just do things manually. Most of the time you're going to have no problem avoiding lock-ons or missiles by simply flying in ways that are hard to track or around objects. Yet there are going to be situations where you are wide open, you are being locked onto, and avoiding it is impossible. In which case I do like to use the backflip U-turn maneuver over the other ones. It provides you with the most dramatic change in positioning and can completely escape an enemy's line of sight. The barrel roll maneuvers tend to be a little bit less effective, often repositioning you around the same general area as you were to begin with, making it very easy for the enemy to just wait out your maneuver and then lock on and shoot you down when it ends. So try to avoid maneuvering to begin with. Instead, do things manually and fly in unpredictable patterns. If you do have to maneuver, be sure to survey the area first and use the most appropriate one, preferably the U-turn where you can get the most benefit. If you don't have time for any of that and you just need to maneuver right away to avoid death, then close your eyes and let the Force guide you. The lock-on mechanic is the alternative to the traditional aim assist we get for infantry combat. The way it works is by having your crosshairs near an enemy vehicle and then aiming. This will initiate the lock-on effect similar to using an aimbot, allowing your primary fire and secondary weapons to essentially always shoot at their target so long as you remain locked on. However, the lock-on mechanic is not infinite like it used to be, nor is it perfect. So you can't just hold it down the entire game like people used to, and it will not always guarantee to connect your shots. Instead, locking on now has an overheat function just like blasters do. So you can lock on and over time the heat builds up, eventually overheating and no longer being able to lock on for a short duration. Then as I mentioned before, the lock-on isn't perfect. Locked on or not, if the enemy player is speed boosted, doing 360s, or just generally at the edge of your camera flying in difficult patterns, the chances of you hitting them are less. What's also important to know is that locking on gives away your intentions to the enemy by informing them that they are being locked onto. It will even go so far as to telling them when you have fired a missile, giving them a perfect indication on when to maneuver, or possibly just suicide as they panic. If you can, try to line up your targets closer to the center of your screen before locking onto them. This ensures that when you do lock on and fire, the bullets are more likely to connect and quickly take them out before they can react. At the same time, don't spend too much time worrying about this and trying to line up perfect shots every time, as waiting too long can also make you miss out. The important part is just reading their movements and reacting to that. The primary weapon of every starfighter is a blaster cannon. Some starter fighters may fire more or less projectiles at once, doing varying amounts of damage, but they all work the same. What's important to know about shooting is that the blaster cannon directly shares its power output with the rest of the starfighter systems. In other words, the faster you are flying and the more additional abilities you have active like shields or speed boost, the less damage you do when you fire. This shared energy output applies to flying speed and abilities. It does not apply to secondary weapons like lock-on missiles or laser barrage. So the best way for you to use your blaster cannon is by not having other abilities active while shooting, and by slowing down as much as possible beforehand. Then, if you take into consideration that you don't want to lock on until you are in an optimal position and ready to fire, we can start to formulate a basic combat strategy like this. Acquire your target, slow down to maximize damage and control, anticipate their movements, lock on when they're in optimal positioning, and then fire. I know it can be a lot to consider at first, but just keep running through these steps in your head as you go to engage each target. Once you get that down, we can start to incorporate some secondary weapons into the mix. Every starfighter comes with either secondary weapons or abilities, and sometimes both. Let's go through these abilities to see what we can learn. To start things off, we have Speed Boost. This ability is pretty self-explanatory. When used, it will allow your vehicle to briefly fly faster. While Speed Boost is enabled, your primary blaster cannon damage will be lowered significantly. So it's good for getting into combat, doing strafe runs, and chasing down targets. but it is not good for keeping it active while you're shooting a target. Next is the defensive shield. It will prevent the vehicle from taking damage for a short duration or until shields are depleted. Just like speed boost, when shields are active, your primary blaster cannon will do less damage. This is usually the alternative to speed boost, providing a more defensive option that works better for dogfighting and defensive positioning. After that is proton torpedoes, ion torpedoes, and concussion warhead. They are all projectiles that can take advantage of the lock-on to track down enemy targets. It's important to note that you must remain locked on with the target until impact or the missile can be avoided. Also remember that locking on and launching a missile is going to give warnings to the target, often causing them to react by flying sporadically or using an evasive maneuver. Then we have Relentless Assault, which will allow the player to fire the main weapon more rapidly, dealing bonus damage and not overheating. There are no downsides or extra projectiles to worry about when using this ability. Just preemptively activate it and you can shred through multiple enemies in a matter of seconds, including hero vehicles. Moving on, we have Sensor Jammer. It's a jammer that can be activated to fly undetected on the minimap and to avoid missile locks. This ability is particularly good for hit and run tactics and defensive positioning, just like the shields. Then finally, there are two abilities that are exclusive to specific starfighters. The R2-D2 repair is for Luke's Red 5, which will heal a set amount of health when activated. And there's a heavy-duty tow cable for the Air T-47 speeder, which allows you to latch onto an AT-AT and take them out during Walker Assault attack phases. After flying for some time, you will begin to notice some slight differences between the starfighters. I'm not just talking about each one having different abilities or secondary weapons. I mean, some starfighters are faster than others, while some are more mobile and responsive. For example, the TIE Interceptor and A-Wing both have a slightly smaller model and move at a faster base speed than other starfighters. But this fast speed comes at a cost. You will turn slower and feel a little bit less responsive when it comes to sudden adjustments in direction. TIE fighters and X-Wings, on the other hand, have a larger model size and move slower than the small fighters. At the same time, they will turn quicker and feel more responsive with sudden precision movements. Therefore, A-Wings and TIE Interceptors are going to be better at strafe runs, where you can quickly speed in and out of combat in a linear path. Whereas TIE Fighters and X-Wings are going to be better for dogfighting and quick maneuvering around objects or in tight spaces. So each starfighter has its own speed and mobility, giving it strengths and weaknesses when it comes to strategies or techniques. As you will see later on, this often corresponds to its other abilities and overall design principles. In other words, the speed versus mobility, combined with its abilities, creates an overall synergy that makes the starfighter better at specific things. Don't get me wrong, they are all still very capable and mobile. It's not impossible to do strafe runs with an X-Wing or quickly maneuver around tight spaces with an A-Wing. The point is, each starfighter has a strength and a weakness. Recognizing these is going to help you decide on what vehicles work best for specific locations, situations, and developing strategies, as well as even when fighting against them. So do your best to play each and every starfighter on different game modes, maps, and try to learn the different strengths and weaknesses of each. Flying doesn't require ninja reflexes, marksman aiming, or any other advanced mechanical type skills. Instead, what you can do to get better is develop your cognitive abilities and situational awareness. Situational awareness is paying attention to what's going on around you and then using that to make decisions. Ideally, you always want to know where is your spawn, where is the enemy spawn, where are your teammates, and where is the enemy, as well as what kind of objects or debris are around you, and what is the current state of the game, as in objectives. A very basic example of needing situational awareness would be when using evasive maneuvers. As we talked about before, they can easily save you or kill you. It's up to you as the player to pay attention to your surroundings and know at any given point in time whether you are safe to use it or not. A less obvious example would be keeping track of the battlefield. If you spawn in and see 20 enemy markers flying around the objective but no friendly ones, is it really such a good idea to charge in right away? Or would it be better to wait a moment for your team to finish respawning and then push in together, thus giving the enemy more targets to deal with at once and not having their whole focus on you? Make sense? Taking that one step further, you could be in a bad situation with multiple enemies on your tail and limited cover to keep you going between maneuvers or abilities. The best thing you can do in this situation is to fly to an area with heavy team presence in an attempt to recruit help and peel them off. So as you can see, not paying attention to anything and just mindlessly flying around is a one-way trip to you suck. But if you can do your best to pay attention to some of the even most basic things happening around you, then it's really going to help you with your decision making and make you an overall better player. When it comes to starfighter combat, you have two types: air versus air combat and air versus ground. With each type of combat, you have different tactics you can use depending on the game mode, your map, and of course the situation. The first tactic that I like to use is the Strafe Run, best suited for vehicles that fly fast and have the speed boost ability. This tactic is very similar to a hit and run style strategy. The idea is to quickly fly in, kill a target, then fly back out, retreating to a safe distance. The tactic works best on air to land combat due to the very nature of the game modes that facilitate this. In other words, it can be very difficult in flying only game modes to quickly fly in, hit targets, and then find a safe spot. The battlefield is often so large and spread out that it just isn't as feasible. Whereas with air-to-ground combat in game modes like Supremacy or Walker Assault, you pretty much only have this one option, where you risk multiple infantry just locking onto you or possible collisions by flying around too low to the ground for a long period of time. To pull this strategy off, you need to acquire some targets or have an idea of where you want to strike. You then position yourself in a way that allows you to fly directly towards the target or attack zone without interference. When in shooting range, you should slow down to minimum speed where you can maximize your damage and control of the vehicle. Be sure to maintain your distance and pull out earlier rather than later to avoid collisions and enemy projectiles. If you are locked onto during your strafe run, this is where you're supposed to use your defensive abilities like the shield or jammer to avoid death. Alternatively, you can speed boost out early to avoid the lock-on and then maneuver when you're out of sight. I would not recommend using the evasive maneuvers until after you have already gotten well above the ground or you're just going to risk collision. The second tactic is what I like to call the sneaky bastard. Suitable for any kind of starfighter, it relies heavily on your ability to manipulate speed and have strong control of the vehicle at all times. The idea for this tactic is to position yourself around objects or debris, not moving out into the open at any point in time, and just waiting for enemies to fly into your domain. This tactic is primarily for air combat only and maps that have the necessary amount of cover. My favorite situations to use this are on the first phase of Battle Station or on Cloud City Fighter Squadron. Essentially, by flying around objects in cover, people will often not choose to engage you over easier targets, or maybe not even notice you at all as they casually fly by. You should fly around these objects and stay near cover, attacking targets that come near you, always being ready to quickly speed up and retreat behind your cover when needed. To successfully pull this off, you're going to need amazing control of your starfighter, able to quickly change speeds and outmaneuver enemies around the objects. You will pretty much be giving up your ability to use the evasive maneuvers because of the amount of debris and heavily rely on your abilities as a pilot. If pulled off successfully, it will give you a good KD ratio while also securing an area for the team. Then the third and last tactic I would like to talk about is called the come at me bro. The idea for this one is to position yourself defensively around your team while you're waiting for enemies to approach. The tactic really only works on flying game modes because you need your teammates being around to help engage with targets and you not being the only target to the enemy. Essentially, you want to wait around for enemies to approach, attacking them as soon as they come into firing distance. You should be able to do insane amounts of damage in a short period of time, killing them before they can even react. As soon as an enemy locks onto you, use your defensive abilities and fly around in circles while your team dispatches them. Once you are clear, go back to slow speed where you then begin destroying everyone as they engage in dogfights with your team, repeating this cycle of floating around killing enemies, then quickly disengaging when needed. Overall, this is the most risky tactic as it relies heavily on your team being there to act as distractions while also covering for you when enemies come at you. Pretty similar to the sneaky bastard tactic, but instead of relying on stealth to keep you safe, it relies on the team and some quick reflexes. So those are the main tactics most people will use in flying combat. They are designed to be stepping stones for you to learn from and build off of, and not an exact set of rules you need to follow to do well. I'm not actually that big of a fan of flying, but by learning the different components, understanding the mechanics, and then practicing some of these strategies, I went a long way in improving my experience. I hope that by watching this video and learning everything there is to know, you too can go out there and enjoy flying content as well. Or at the very least not suck. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, or even donate to support the channel. Links for that are in the description below. More Death Star DLC videos to come soon, but until then, as always, may the Otaku be with you.